let us start with all that we are hearing about the economic situation in China. How severe are China's economic problems? In fact, we are hearing that apart from real estate crisis and rampaging unemployment, there is a food crisis also, because of which forest land is being converted to farming land, and that China could be facing famine. So how bad is the situation, and how is it likely to impact not only Xi Jinping's domestic policy, but also internal policy? Professor Deepak, if you can take that question.
Yeah, thank you, Joyita. I think as far as the economic crisis in China is concerned, it's pretty acute. To start with the real estate bubble, because it's important, as during the reform era we see that 45% of GDP, it went on to construction, including real estate, and real estate, I suppose, is accounted for almost 30% of the Chinese GDP, and 70% of people's income, especially the high middle class and middle class, it went to the real estate. But now we have seen in 2021 how Evergrande and now the Country Garden, so they not been able to service their debt. And also, other real estate companies like Yuanyangshui, so they are in crisis. I think with this, if you see the economic indicator which were released by National Statistical Bureau of China recently, though it projects that China's economy is growing by 5.5% in the first half of this year, but the figures, I think underneath, though they are very, very, you can say, worrying. Why I'm saying worrying? One is if you see the unemployment rate, especially in the age group of 16 to 24, it has shot up to 21.2%. In fact, it was in June, but now the Statistical Bureau of China, so they have withheld, they are not publishing the data. So I think it has shot up more than 25%. So the crisis is that the people are like flat. People's confidence in the economy, it is not there. If you see the investment, it was just 4.3 billion US dollars, I think, which is for the first time it has declined so much. And on Xi Jinping's, you can say, handling of the economy, especially the post-COVID, and also, the crackdown on the edtech, high-tech firms. So it has brought disaster to Chinese economy. So I think he is pretty insecure as far as economy is concerned, and we have to see how far China's deflationary trends it go on. I think it is in a serious trouble, and Biden has said that it is a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, okay, Professor Kondapalli, how is it likely to impact Xi Jinping's, global policy in terms of a BRI? And what are the chances of an unrest in China? Is there going to be what we saw, about that white paper revolution that we saw some time back against his post-COVID? Has he been able to control that anger? Will this unrest go? Is there an actual possibility of another Tiananmen Square type trouble taking place?
Well, I think it's a mixed picture because, as you mentioned, the white paper revolution. In 1991, there were about 5,500 protests in China, and the Premier of the State Council used to give the figures of mass protests. Any protest which has more than 1,000 people is a mass protest. And this figure of 5,500 has increased to over 50,000 by 1995, and then about 2,46,000 by about 2012 when Xi Jinping took over. And then the state council stopped giving those data regarding the mass protests. But the Tsinghua University did a survey and they came out with something like 350,000 protests. And then even Tsinghua University had stopped publishing those. So one of the things is there is protests rising, the mass protests, mass incidents as they call, has increasing, which indicates that the economic issues have become problematic. According to a survey by the Academia Sinica in Taipei, there is 53% of these protests are related to economic problems, like pensions being withdrawn, the electricity subsidies have been withdrawn, or tuition fee being raised, or social welfare benefits, healthcare and other aspects being withdrawn. So these were basically against the economic, things that have emerged over a period of time. So number one. Number two, the December lockdown protests in about 18 cities in China following the Xinjiang Urumqi incident, where several people were burned to death. That triggered a lot of protests across China, and it is estimated that some 450 million were in the lockdown condition. Shanghai has seen the worst case scenario with 3 months, 4 months extended lockdown, and that resulted in a lot of unrest and so on and so forth. But what is important is that for every 1% decline in growth rate in China, Chinese Academy of Social Sciences suggested there will be about 8 million unemployed. And as you know, China declined from 10% growth rate in 2010 to roughly 3.3% last year. So there is a nearly 7% decline, that is 7 into 8 million unemployed. A Hong Kong economist suggests that due to COVID alone, 80 million unemployed people have joined the ranks. This has created a lot of unrest. So it is true that there is a domestic factor for Xi Jinping to address, and this has further been aggravated with the decoupling or de-risking, as Janet Yellen mentioned, that process. And also there is the BRI projects being scaled down. They have invested about $956 billion so far. But according to aid data, there is 16 to 17 countries have fallen into debt, including Hambantota in Sri Lanka, Pakistan CPEC projects, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kenya, and other countries. So there is also these BRI constraints that China faces.
Yeah, okay, Ambassador Bambawale, I just wanted to ask you about, what are the chances of Xi Jinping trying to externalize these problems, divert attention by maybe military action against Taiwan, by maybe starting some kind of a limited conflict with India along in the LAC?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very good question. Let me start by saying that yes, China does face economic problems, particularly over the last 6 months or so. But we should not jump to any conclusions. We must wait and watch for a little more time, say another 6 months, to see which direction China's economy is going. They have issues, they have problems. Let's see for the next 6 months. If those problems deepen, as you are suggesting, they might, yes, there is a probability, though all that probability is low, that China could try to divert their own people's attention by doing something externally, either in the South China Sea or in the Straits of Taiwan or even on the India-China border.
Mr. Ranade, we have been hearing a lot about Xi Jinping's paranoia. The thing is that apparently he is very careful about going to certain parts of the world where he thinks that maybe his security will be compromised. So would you say, consider you know what is going on. The thing is that would you say that Xi Jinping is becoming increasingly paranoid?
No doubt. No doubt he is becoming paranoid. And here I'll just touch upon what was said by the other panelists about the economy. The economy is in such a distressed state today that it's affected wide sections of Chinese society. Provincial employees, that means in the provinces, their salaries have been reduced, their bonuses have been withdrawn or recalled. Pensions are being cut, subsidies are disappearing, jobs of course are at a premium. Graduates who are the only child in that family are not getting jobs. So there's widespread dissatisfaction, apart from what is happening in the PLA, where he's dismissed a whole lot of generals and is carrying out successive year-long campaigns on political and ideological indoctrination. He's now started a new campaign which they call Two Safeguards, which is basically to ensure his safety and his position and his position as the chairman of the military commission. And that has now been brought in as one of the charges against cadres who, and they're accused of betraying Xi Jinping. So that's one sign of the paranoia that he has. The second, he has changed the practice of the secretary of the secretariat setting the agenda for the meetings of the Politburo and Politburo Standing Committee. Now he does it himself. So he obviously doesn't want any surprises to be sprung on him at the time of the meeting. The third, there are repeated reports of his, of course, shifting bedrooms, etc. But apart from
Please
that...
elaborate on that. I'm certain not many people know about it.
Well, I mean, he's not sure of the personnel around him, the security personnel around him. So there have been repeated changes in the security setup, particularly the unit that looks after the security of the VIPs. His minister, I mean the current Minister of Public Security, which looks at internal security, has recommended and has been accepted that all members of the Politburo Standing Committee, which is 7 people who rule China, the Politburo and the Central Committee, should be put under watch. They should be put under surveillance, and they should not be allowed any authority to either hire people or pay them any money. So that has been implemented. These are all signs of paranoia. And he has also started now personally vetting, and I stress personally vetting, people who are recommended for appointment either to the Central Committee or central organizations. So he has really made it a one-man kind of show. But even then, he is making mistakes, and of late, we are seeing articles appearing criticizing not him by name, but his policies. And that's a typical Chinese thing. I mean, like for example, if I want to criticize, let's say Mr. X, but I find he's a bit powerful, I won't criticize him directly, obviously, because he's going to get after me. But I'll criticize his father, his uncle, or someone who looks like him. And the message goes through.
In fact, Professor Deepak, you have been writing in the Sunday Guardian about certain things that have been coming in the Chinese media. Now, how secure, I mean, given the paranoia, there must be a reason why he is feeling so insecure. I mean, how happy are the people surrounding him with Xi Jinping, and how secure is his position? Because right now it is a third, in fact, unprecedented term. Now, I'm certain experts say that he's also going to try for a 4th term. So how secure is his position right now?
Yeah, well, I think he's the president for life. That is for sure, you know, and as long as he wishes to stay there, he could stay there, and that's why constitutional change and so on and so forth. I think he is pretty insecure for a couple of reasons. One, and the foremost, is that what he had been reporting. I mean, his news agency, especially Xinhua, is saying that the liudu, or that the poison of erstwhile Po Xilai and Zhou Yongkang gang. So it is still there, whether it is in the Department of Legal and Political and Legal Department, whether it is in the public security, whether it is in the army, PL itself, and we have seen the kind of purges, in the garb of this anti-corruption campaign in his decade of reign in China. 4.6 million of Communist Party members, though they have been prosecuted. investigated, and many of them, are top-level Politburo members. So this is one thing. And second thing, I think, which is extremely important, is he feels that his detractors, so they could, do these political or financial coups, especially the financial coup, because the kind of capital, which is controlled by his detractors, be it Boyu Capital, handled by Jiang Zemin's grandson, or either CITIC, this capital, and various other sectors, say telecom, power sector by Li Peng, and his sons, the petroleum sector, insurance sector in the hands of Wen Jiabao and all. So he is pretty insecure as far as this financial capital is concerned, and that is why these crackdowns on these sectors, and recently there's a crackdown on health sector. It is being proved, and various directors of the hospitals, so they have been investigated and imprisoned. And of course, the corruption charges, some running into billions and many 150 million and many in millions. So they have been slapped on these people. And finally, I think if you want to know better about what is his position, I would attract audiences attention towards one article which appeared on 21st of instant in Singapore's Lianhe Zaobao, United Morning Post of Singapore, written none other than by Liu Guoxiong, erstwhile member of CPPCC, from Hong Kong. And he says, that China, basically he is not naming Xi Jinping, but without naming, he has, you can say, devastated his rule in China, saying that the consumption, which was one of the driving force of Chinese economy, the investment, which was driving force of Chinese economy, and the exports, and all of them, they have been, plummeted during Xi Jinping's rule. So he's saying these three engines, so now have been replaced by National Statistical Bureau of China and Publicity Department of the Communist Party of China and Xinhua News Agency.
Professor Kondapalli, one question. Is the man, the character of Xi Jinping deciding India policy, or all that Xi Jinping is doing giving an extra edge, a very sharp and rough edge to China's, the Communist Party's India policy?
Well, in terms of the decision-making process in China's system, it is the Politburo Standing Committee members who head the small leading groups, and the China Foreign Affairs Bureau, and the recently formed, 2018 formed, the Foreign Affairs Commission, which is now, the director is Wang Yi, who has also now become the foreign minister. So in terms of the decision-making process, it is the Politburo Standing Committee members, and specifically General Secretary Xi Jinping, who decides about this. And then, of course, there are several think tanks which provide inputs to the foreign policy making. That's at the broad level. In terms of India, these levels would also provide inputs. I would specifically suggest that the KIKIR, the China Institutes for Contemporary International Relations, provides much of that input, because we have seen some of the researchers who work in this think tank providing, for example, the post-Galwan related matters, what should be the China's foreign policy, etc., vis-a-vis India. So from that point of view, Xi Jinping is the mover and shaker, obviously. Okay. And I would specifically refer to the PTI correspondent who interviewed Xi Jinping during his first visit to India in 2014, September, where he mentions about 5-pillar strategy towards India, basically about communication and developmental partnership and a host of other things. So that continues still. in a way.
Okay, I'm being told 5 more minutes, but I think we can squeeze in 2-3 questions. Ambassador Bambawale, it is being said that Xi Jinping has kind of delegated India-China relationship to the Chinese, to the military. And Pakistan is central to that policy. So isn't China kind of betting on a dead horse? Could it, and is there a difference in terms of how China should be coming across to India in China in terms of the Communist Party, difference of opinion?
No, I think what the Chinese decided was that they would back Pakistan so that it keeps India on the back foot. If that doesn't work, then the Chinese themselves start moving troops like they did in 2020 and continues even today. I'll just say one additional thing, Jayita, which is if India has to rise to the China challenge, we have to understand that on the economy, there's a huge discrepancy, there's a huge asymmetry between China's economy, which is roughly $18 trillion, and India's economy, which is roughly $3.75 trillion. We have to narrow this gap over the next 5, 7, 10, 15 years. And if we narrow that gap, we will be able to tackle our China challenge.
Mr. Ranade, at what level are the decisions of incursions along the LSE taken?
If we are talking about minor intrusions,
No, I'm talking
just
about the
along
big
the
ones.
border, that's the local commander. Otherwise, there's only one man. I heard what the others have said. The policy of decision by consensus has disappeared. It's not there in China.
Okay.
It's one man, and that's Xi Jinping. He's the head of the foreign policy establishment. He's the head of the security establishment. He's the head of the military establishment. He's the head of the party. He's the one who decides. Anyone else doesn't count.
And the final question, a quick one. Is an India-China kinetic conflict inevitable? And what is the timeline for it? And that's a question for everybody. Quick, short answers.
No, I don't think at this point in time China wishes to have a conflict between neither with India. So therefore, in near and I would say even in medium term, so the possibility of conflict is ruled out.
I do not think there will be a kinetic conflict between China and India because of the kind of destruction that it would take place. Non-kinetic means is quite possible on cyber domain, on space domain, on maritime domain. Those are quite possible.
As I said earlier, if we allow the asymmetry in the economic situation, in the size of the economy between our two countries, India and China, to continue or to grow, there will be a conflict because the Chinese know how to bully smaller countries. If we reduce that gap, if we narrow that gap over the next 5 to 7 years, there's no way that there will be a conflict.
I think the chances of low-intensity conflicts are very high.
Okay.
And a major war may not be. But what they did in April 2020 is an indication of the kind of things they can do. And the kind of forces that they deployed against us, 70,000 strong in those mountainous areas, is something we cannot ignore. So I would say that chances are high. They will be below the threshold of an all-out war, but they will certainly be enough to ask us to respond and cause some pain.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, all of you, and thank you for listening to it.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.